Do countries get named after people, or do people get named after their homelands? To find out, we're taking the northern route today as we continue with our journey to break down how every country got its name in Atlas Altera, a fictional world-building project with lots to say about our world. If you like learning history, geography, or linguistics, stick around for some etymological intrigue. We'll begin with some of the more familiar-looking countries in Scandinavia. First up, Denmark, spelt, embarrassingly, with an A instead of an E. Now, Denmark's name comes from a Norse word derived from an old Theodic root word, dene, meaning low, which is compounded with the Norse word mørk, meaning borderland, forest. The concept of a marshland dates back to prehistoric times, with mereg, meaning edge, boundary, in Old Indo-Europic. The association of forests with borders is quite intuitive when you think about looking at a forest's edge from a pasture or field. Our next familiar looking toponym is Swedeland, which is slightly less practical than what we call Sweden in our world, but it gives me much more satisfaction seeing the analytical consistency and suffix conventions in this neck of the woods. Swedeland gets its name from an Old Norse word, svjar, which is thought to mean one's own or self, and that word is compounded with the Norse land, so literally meaning land of our tribe. Interestingly, the word svjar is thought to further derive from Old Theodic svebas, with a similar meaning, and that makes Swedeland cognate to the toponym of Swabia in Almany. Across the sea, we have the land of the Goths. Gut is a closely related endonym to the Geats and the Goths, whose names ultimately derive from the Old Theodic root gutunon, to pour. These endonyms can be interpreted as meaning those who pour out, those who spread, seed, or those who sow. And in the mountains here, we have Jämtland, which gets its name from the Jamts. In Altera, the term Jamt is actually used to refer to early southern Sami people. The Jamts are then one of the first Sami people to come in contact with the Norse, adopting many of their customs and integrating with Norse settlers. The Jamt name itself is derived from the Old Theodic stem emmat, meaning persistent, enduring, hardworking. Thus, the translation of the toponym literally means land of the hardworking. And standing in for what we know as Norway in our world, we have Thelmark. The name comes from the ancient Theodic Thelir tribe, whose name was likely connected to the Old Norse word Thulur, which means fir tree, thus giving the meaning the marshland of the firs. And to the north, we have a Sami-speaking country that makes use of a common exonym featured in the Norse sagas. In Altera, Gwenland takes from Gwen, the ancient name recorded for peoples to the north of Thelmark, which is also recorded as the land of Quennes in Old English chronicles. There's a possibility it originates from Kvenna, meaning woman in Old Norse. If we go further north, we reach a much larger version of what we know as Svalbard. In Altera, this landmass is known as Iceland, and it has the same etymology as the Iceland that we know in our world, with the initial part of the word is, meaning ice, so literally giving the meaning land of ice. Now with Iceland over here, then what happened to the counterpart of Iceland in our world? Well, how about the land of frost? In Altera, this landmass here is called Rhineland, from the old Rhimish toponym Hrimland, which is a compound of Hrym, frost, rime ice, and land, thus meaning land of frost, land of rime ice. Now over to these isles that stand for the Faroe Islands, we have Fairland. This Altera name has a similar etymology as its real-world counterpart, being likely a case of Norse homophonic translation of an older Celtic toponym, fjord, meaning pasture or eaten-up outfield in Old Irish. Alternate theories suggest that the name could come entirely from the West Norse dialect, coming from the word fjær, meaning far, or fara, to go, to travel. There's also the possibility that the name comes from fair, meaning sheep, in the Eastern Norse dialect, though I believe this is now seen as the least likely etymological scenario. And now let's go to Shetland. Its name is quite straightforward, coming from the Norse compound of hilt, meaning hilt, like a sword hilt, and land, literally meaning hilt land, but better translated as headland, promontory. Interestingly, hilt may have been a homophonic translation by the Norse of a Pictish tribe, the Kate, or cat people. This makes Shetland ultimately a cognate to modern places like Caithness in Scotland. Now back over to Finland, with that extra N, first recorded in Old English as Finnas, the exonym ultimately comes from the Old Norse Finnr, meaning wanderer, hunter-gatherer, possibly originally having a similar meaning as the word Finnis, walker or traveler by foot, a term used by Old Indo-Europic peoples to refer to nomadic hunter-gatherers they encountered. And now over here, to what is sometimes called Lapland in our world, we have Sapmark. In Altera, the word Sap historically used to refer to northern Sami peoples. This word is derived from the Sappish endonym Sapmi, which is possibly derived from the old Baltic word Zemme, meaning land. As a borrowing into the various Sami languages, it had the connotation of meaning native, inlander. This makes Sapmark a cognate to not only the various Sami endonyms, but also the endonym of Finland, Suomi. Moving now over to here in Scotland, we have another Sami state. The name comes from the Norse Skalutur, meaning baldness, which is rather curious. It may have been a reference to a high degree of hair loss noticed in the forebears of the Scottish, or perhaps that they were often capped with certain headwear. Oddly, this ethnonym is accepted by the Scots themselves, for apart from referring to themselves as Sami, they also used the derived and cognate endonym Kotta to refer to themselves. And in this corner here, we have Auckland, a stand-in for Karelia in Altera. It gets its name from the Old Norse word alka, which refers to razorbill, a kind of seabird. An alternative theory is that it is from the Norse homophonic translation of the name for the sea inlet east of the Green Sea, Aldoga, which was borrowed from Old Finnish Alodejoki, a cognate to the modern Aukish Altokas, meaning wavy. Now to the south here in Gutland, standing in for what we know historically as Ingermanland or Ingria, Norse sagas attribute these related toponyms to Ingigerd Olofsdotter of Sweden, a princess of Kiev who eventually was granted lands where Ingria was located. Her name is from the Norse Inga Garthur, meaning the god Yngvi's protection. There's also the theory that the name is far older, that the Vodic name of the Inkeri River was the inspiration, and that the river itself is derived from an early Finnic or even West Uralic root, Inger, meaning stream, just as it does in some Uralic languages such as Angjur, meaning stream, in the various Mari languages. In Altera, the contracted form of Gutland also allows for a far simpler explanation, which is that the name comes from the Norse Gether, protection, yard, or fenced in, referring to the territories around the Mares or Neva Strait being strategically important for fortification and control since the early contact period of the Vikings, and that there was recognition that these coasts were well fortified. Now I should note, Gutland in Altera is actually no longer an isthmus, but has been edited into a peninsula jutting into a strait between the Neville Sea and the Reval Channel. Across this channel is Estland, which resembles the Estonia of our world. The name comes from the Old Estish endonym Esti, believed to be a borrowing from Indo-Europic, as it is connected to the ancient Aisti tribe, whose name may derive from the Theodic root Aistana, meaning kiln or grain drying room. And off the coast here we have Ostland, which comes from Oslo, derived from the Old Norse name Eisysla, meaning island district in Norse, which would make the full name translate to land of island. And this actually corresponds to the translation of the Oslish endonym Sodoma. And where Latvia should stand is the Altera country known as Lethland. It comes from an archaic Lethish name, possibly for a river or stream called the Latuva, whose name meant something akin to muddy water. And back to the coast, we have Courland, which comes from the endonym Kurz, a Baltic term that roughly translates to maritime, related to water and the sea or coastal area. This word is ultimately descended from Old Indo-Europic kurs, meaning swift or to run. Interestingly, we have another country over here nearby with a similar etymology by way of a different root word. The name for Pomerania, you see, comes from the Old Slavic pomora, meaning along or by the sea, and thus also has a maritime connotation. Beside it, we have Polony, which again sounds so close to the real thing, but has its own flair of difference in Altera. The name Polony comes from the endonym of the Poles, who get their name from the archaic word Polania, which means field dwellers. And beside it, we have this curious and more recent state, known as Yidland, formed from the ashes of the Second World War in Altera's lore. The name comes from the Yiddish autonym Yid, which is derived from the Hebrew endonym Yehudim, meaning Jews or Judeans. The Jewish endonym, roughly translating to tribe of Judah, is in turn derived from a historical and biblical character, Judah, the son of Jacob, which is ultimately sourced to the Hebrew Yada, meaning praise. Judah is also the name in Jewish tradition for the strip of hilly land between Jerusalem and the Negev desert, the place where the tribe of Judah settled in the biblical narrative. Similar to how the term Turk has fallen out of use after the First World War, the root of this country name is also almost never used in isolation or by itself in English. Note though that there's also the spelling difference here from our world. And to the east now we have not Lithuania but Lithuany, which, interestingly, is similar to Letland and Latvia in that it also gets its name from a body of water. It is thought that the name comes from the rivulet Lietava, which is related to the Lithuanian verb lieti, meaning to spill, and related to the toponym of Lithuany is Lipka. Lipka was originally a Lipkish word for the region that was known by a homophonic translation of the Lithuanian endonym of Lietuva, a historic name for Lithuany. This homophonic translation seems to have been forgotten, however, and was later replaced with an etymology of phonosemantic matching, with the name being connected with the Polonian word Lipka, meaning small linden or lime tree. And finally, over here we have Belarus. The name, just like in the real world, comes from the Old Slavic Belarusi, translating as White Ruthenia or White Rus, a reference to the old state of Rus that was located in modern-day Ruthenia, around Kiev. If you want to know the etymology of Rus, stay tuned, as I'll be covering that in the next video when we get to Russia and Ruthenia. Okay, and this is where we're going to have to leave it today. I think after breaking down today's set of country names, it should be clear that country names can come from both landscape features and references to the principal inhabitants of those landscapes at one time. In some cases, a place is named after a people, and in other cases, the people will take on the name of the land. Now, even though it is a fictional world, Atlas Altera is no different than the real world in boasting names as storied and varied as the ones that have been buried in our past. I hope with this video you've learned not only new lore, but new facts about the very real world, and that you have had your interest piqued on some marginal corner of the world. If you would like to learn more about the other aspects of Atlas Altera, you can check out my Map Room Ramblings series, where my friend Tristan and I have longer discussions on the project, and also go to the project website, atlasaltera.com, where you can view various map graphics, read up on lore, project explanations, and also test out an interactive map we're trying to build. And finally, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. See you until next time.